Today is Friday, February 9th. We're going to go around the bases with our MLB insider here at the New York Post. He is none other than John Heyman. John, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you, Ryan?
I'm doing well. We are less than a week from pitchers and catchers reporting all around baseball. Obviously, the Mets and Yankees, we want to talk about their projections heading into spring training and how these teams look. So I want to start off with the Yankees, John, and to get a launching point here for the Yankees, we saw the PECOTA rankings come out this week. It's a highly debated thing of how these projections are made and how they work out. And they have the Yankees finishing surprisingly first in the AL East above the Baltimore Orioles, who did win the division last year. And after they've already acquired Corbin Burns. So they have them finishing with 94.4 wins, so around 94 wins, first in the AL East. Do you feel like the Yankees, the way they are currently constructed, something we've talked about a lot this offseason, do you feel like they are the best team in the AL East and they're poised to win that division?
First of all, the only thing worse than the PECOTA projections were my predictions last year. I had the Padres going to the World Series, so that's how bad I was. So take all of this with a grain of salt, if you like. I've had some good years, some bad years. Last year was my worst ever, so we shall see. Yeah, I frankly don't. It's Las Vegas is picking the Yankees in the division too. I think we talked about this last week. I frankly don't get it. They were 19 games behind the Orioles. The Orioles are a young team on the rise, so presumably improving. Jackson Holliday should add this year for the Orioles. I'm not getting it. Now, I do think the Yankees are much better than the 82 win team that they were last year. Obviously, they had so many injuries. So I think the team that they fielded is much better than 82 wins. Are they better than the Orioles? I'm a little skeptical on that. I also will say, obviously, Soto is a big plus. I don't know if Ward directly computes to the number of wins, but he's about a 7 WAR player. So does he add 7 wins? Obviously they'd have a different starting left fielder, hopefully be better than a replacement player, but let's say he adds 5 to 6 wins. So Soto, plus the fact that they were very hurt last year and underperformed because of those injuries, I do think they're going to be much better. I'm skeptical about winning the division, but maybe I'm too influenced by what happened last year. I think that was part of my
Right.
problem the year before, but I don't get it. The Orioles are a very, very young team and a very, very good team.
Yeah, I think the way PECOTA might be looking at this is not only the addition of Juan Soto, but also Alex Verdugo. You're bringing a little bit more balance to that lineup with left-handed bats. That's something the Yankees lineup desperately needed that we have talked about that they did address this offseason to their credit. However, like to your point, though, the Orioles did win the division, and you cannot forget about the Toronto Blue Jays. PECOTA actually has them finishing second in the AL East this season above the Baltimore Orioles, even with the addition, like we talked about, of Corbin Burns. My follow-up to this with the Yankees is you had written about Spencer Jones and how they value him. He's the top prospect for the Yankees. They view him, according to you and the people you talk to, is that they view him as the Aaron Judge type prospect, where he's a left-handed bat, big kid, lots of power. It's awesome to see him hit some home runs. So we've had these discussions. The Yankees, they need another pitcher because their rotation is really thin when you look at it from the starting five. There's just not much depth there. I think a lot of Yankees fans were a little shook when Corbin Burns went to the Orioles and what they saw that return was for Corbin Burns. So the question is was Spencer Jones a prospect the Yankees could have parted ways with to get a Corbin Burns in negotiations with the Milwaukee Brewers? Because to be frank, we've talked about this. I just don't know if the Yankees have enough pitching to win this division to what we discussed here.
Yeah, I mean, they could have gotten Burns and they could have gotten Cease. He certainly was a big part of those discussions and a big part of the Padres discussion. I saw some Orioles fans on Twitter or whatever you call it now, X, suggesting, well, we have these other guys. We would always beat out the Yankees. But if the Yankees had offered Spencer Jones, I believe that they would have gotten Corbin Burns. I don't think there's much question about that. But hey, look, maybe the Yankees have the same models as Las Vegas and PECOTA, and they're already better than the Orioles for some reason. I don't know. So if they're already better, I'm frankly of a mind, and I know I'm the one who wrote about this, that they could have done this. I'm not saying that they should have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. I think Spencer Jones is that good. I don't want to jinx him. I'm not going to say he's another Aaron Judge, who I think is the best position player in baseball. I'm not counting Ohtani as a position player. I don't want to lay that on him, but I do think he is an outstanding prospect. And again, we rely on PECOTA and all these different things and the rankings. And I saw a ranking where Spencer Jones was not even in the top 100.
Yeah.
Now, the person who ranked it had some explanation about why he wasn't in the top 100. I mean, let's face it, the teams think he's in the top 100. The teams probably put him in the top 50.
Right.
And that's because of the ceiling. They believe that he could be a big star. And those are the kind of guys that teams do not want to trade. Maybe these rankings are more about the floor of a team or some of a prospect and thinking what he's certainly going to be at the very least. But I don't think the teams look at it that way. And Spencer Jones is probably a 30-30 guy in the future based on the projections and the scouts and everything that you hear. So I would not have traded him for Burns, a one-year pitcher.
Who's going to test free agency.
Yeah, right. I mean, you're not going to be able to sign him right away, right? And the Yankees need to sign Soto first, right? And both are represented by Boris. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a lot of money. It's a one-year player at this point, right? I mean, it's certainly he's going to be a free agent, and they've got a shot at him in free agency, just like they would if he was on the team or on the Orioles. I doubt the Orioles have a shot at him in free agency, right? So he's on the Orioles right now. So,
right.
I know they have a new owner, so
Correct.
I'm not going to say 0% chance, but it is Baltimore. And again, all Baltimore fans, I am saying I think you're winning that division. So don't get on me too bad.
No, you can't get on you too bad, John. And I think that's where we get into the prospect rankings and where these teams how they view their prospects. I think a lot of Yankees fans saw the return package from the Orioles and said they didn't give up their first or second best prospects, but you're asking for the Yankees' best prospect in return. But to your point, it's how teams view them and how they value their prospects in-house. So
right. Yeah, I want to say the Orioles prospects are much better by and large. I'm not saying they're better than Spencer Jones, but I mean, certainly Jackson Holiday's the number one prospect in baseball. So he's not going anywhere. They have just a load of great prospects. They've done a great job in the draft. They've drafted very high, where they lose 110 games 3 years in a row, something like that, right? So you're going to have great prospects, and they did well with those draft picks. So, but they weren't giving up those players for Burns. This is basically the similar package to what they'd offer for Cease. These are the two guys they wanted to give up. Ortiz, who again is ranked higher than Spencer Jones in some of these lists. Crazy, I get it, but I mean, Ortiz is a good prospect, but he was never going to play with Baltimore, right?
Yeah.
They got a fit Jackson Holiday in there. They have Mateo. They have obviously Gunnar Henderson. They have they have so many shortstops who are young and not going anywhere that he was never going to play for them. And DL Hall, from what I can gather, 3/4 of the team think he's a relief pitcher. Now, obviously, Milwaukee doesn't think that. They think he is potentially a 2 or 3 starter, but that was their evaluation. Now, that's their evaluation, but if they would have gotten Spencer Jones, I believe, don't know this for a fact, I believe they would have made that deal.
Yeah, it's a great point, John. I think a lot of Yankees fans, you should still be really excited. Like you said, Juan Soto is going to be on this team. Spencer Jones, still a top prospect for the team. Hopefully he can develop. I think that's kind of like the debate we'll see next offseason when this season does finish up. The Yankees, that projected outfield, you're supposed to have the Martian healthy by halfway through the season. You got Aaron Judge locked up long-term. If you lock up Juan Soto this next offseason and you do sign him to an extension, it kind of does put that question into, is there even room for a Spencer Jones on this roster in the future? So it'll be interesting to see how that situation does play out. Let's move over to the Mets, though, in Queens. So we saw a little bit, the Mets PECOTA projections. I should start there, actually. The Mets PECOTA projections, they have them finishing third in the NL East behind the Braves and the Phillies. They have them projected between 83 to 78 wins. They're saying that at that 83 win mark, the Mets will get that third wildcard spot in the National League, making the playoffs. So my question to you, John, is do you agree with those rankings and projections of the Mets are a playoff team as currently constructed according to those rankings?
I'll agree with third place. I think there's no way around that at this point. I mean, obviously they finished behind the Marlins last year. I think that was pretty flukish. I don't see them competing, nor does anybody see them competing with the Braves or the Phillies this year, although I'm surprised that PECOTA has the Phillies really not that much higher than the Mets. I mean, I can't imagine that the Mets beat out the Phillies based on the rosters right now, but I agree. I mean, I was going to say this is an 81 win team. And I guess in the National League, that's got a shot. I wouldn't project them as a playoff team. I guess they're projecting them as a playoff team, but yet they're saying there's a 49% chance they make it. I'm not a math major, but I guess that's possible if there's nobody else with more than 49% for that sixth spot. But they got a shot. They said they wanted to compete this year. PECOTA or no PECOTA, I think they are going to compete. I do think they underachieved last year for whatever reason. Obviously, they're missing the two Hall of Fame pitchers, but I like the moves they made. I like Minaya. I think Severino's got a shot, and he's got to not tip his pitches. I'm sure that was his issue more than anything last year. They definitely have talent in that rotation. I like the way they beefed up the bullpen at the end, and obviously they've got Nimmo. They've got Lindor, and they still have Alonso. So they should win half their games. And if PECOTA says that's a playoff team, that's nice to hear. I'm not sure 81 wins gets in the playoffs. I know that wouldn't be great for baseball.
Yeah, what's interesting with the Mets team, and besides just the lineup that we talked about, is obviously you have a new manager in Carlos Mendoza being, he's going to take charge of this team, see how he manages this roster and how he can get more out of this team. The other thing is the DH position. We talked about Vientos. We talked about some internal options. We saw reports this week that the Mets have been in contact with JD Martinez, who is still a free agent out there. So what is your feeling if they do land, like let's say they do somehow land at JD Martinez on a deal? Does that increase their chances, maybe even finish second in the NL East with that lineup and the pitching that you've talked about?
Yes, that was a New York Post report. So I do believe that the Mets are in contact with JD Martinez, as we are very reliable. They're in contact. Does that mean they're going to sign him? At this point, we've got so many great hitters still out there. We're really not sure what to predict for any of these guys. Basically, more than half of the hitters are still out there as we do this, where I think we're basically 3 days away from the Mets starting spring training. We had David Stearns on the podcast with Joel Sherman, and he didn't suggest that they were really gung-ho about getting a DH. And a lot of teams like to move it around and, use that for kind of a half day off for their stars, including Alonso and the other guys. So, I think if they can get a deal, they'll do it. But a deal for them is still not a deal because they are over that. I think it's $297 million, that Steve Cohen tax threshold. I know they should be flattered that he's got the name of the tax threshold, but even if they give him 10 million, they're really paying him 20 million. But at 10 million a year, that's a bargain. And if they end up not in the race, you can certainly trade them at the deadline, and another team may not be over that threshold, so it may be worth more to them. So I'm not ruling it out. I think they like Vientos as a hitter. I think they like the idea of moving guys in there. So I don't think they're anxious to do this, but if it falls in their lap, I think they'll take him.
Yeah, no doubt. He's a heck of a hitter still, man. And
Great hitter.
He can impact the lineup so much. And to what we discussed so many times, he gives protection to your best hitter in Pete Alonso.
That's been a problem. Yep, you're absolutely right. That's been a big issue. And Alonso, give him credit for hitting 46 home runs last year without that protection. You'd hope that Beatty could be that protection someday, or maybe Alvarez could be it. But right now, they do not have a proven hitter to bat behind Alonso that anybody's going to be afraid of. And look, JD Martinez was the cleanup hitter in the All-Star game for the National League. So that's a proven hitter.
Absolutely. It definitely is a proven hitter. All right, John, let's move on to our next topic here. Free agency. We talked about a little bit here. There's still a ton of big names out there. Cody Bellinger, Blake Snell. Also, we saw you wrote about Trevor Bauer is out there as well as a starting pitching option. So just real quick, Trevor Bauer, how do you see this playing out? Is he going to get signed, you feel like, in this spring training window? And also, what's the latest with those other big names?
Yeah, first on Trevor Bauer, I talked to his lawyer agent. He's got a lot of lawyers at this point, but basically the guy's working at his agent, John Fedorov, along with Rachel Luba. And, he's surprised that he has not gotten an offer yet to this point. Bauer has made an offer to play for the minimum for anybody. And Fedorov made it clear that if it's any issue, they just get rid of him, and it's the minimum, and that's it. Now, it is the minimum plus incentives. I don't think they've really discussed exactly what the incentives are with anybody yet, because nobody's shown enough interest to even take him. So if I were betting, I wouldn't bet that he's going to get a job at this point, but he's certainly got a reliable agent working for him, trying for him. He's got the longest suspension in baseball history. I'm not going to get into all the details, this or that, and I've seen people on both sides of this on Twitter, and I don't want to get in the middle of it, but the fact is he's got the longest domestic violence suspension in baseball history at 194 games. That's inarguable. So obviously that was something that was not good. and the reputation precedes him. I mean, he was seen as a very arrogant guy who didn't get along with everybody. This is one reason the Yankees cannot sign him. He and Gerrit Cole were on the UCLA team together, and they did not get along. And we're not going to blame Gerrit Cole at this point. And certainly, he's not hard to get along with. Trevor Bauer, was an arrogant, smart, young guy, and I think we'll see. I mean, he does sound remorseful, when you talk to him. So, maybe he will convince somebody, but at this point, I'm not convinced he's getting a job.
Very fascinating with him. It's a tricky situation, to your point. That reputation that comes with him, if you do sign him, even if it is a minimum, the risk you might say is low, but at the same time, it's the public image and fallback of you're signing this guy. So it is a tricky situation. Real quick,
it's a publicity versus productivity. It's an unusual case. We've seen guys not be able to stay in the major leagues. Obviously, Osuna, I don't want to judge whose situation was worse or better, but Osuna's was not a good situation. I'll say that.
Aroldis Chapman.
And Osuna has not resurfaced at the major league level, despite very good talent. Not Bauer level talent, which is way up here, but pretty good talent. Addison Russell, shortstop of the world champion 2000 history making 2016 Cubs, not gotten a job. So, if he doesn't get a job, he would not be the only one. I would say that a majority of the guys who've had a violation, a suspension at the major league level, and were at least in their prime, have been able to get some sort of job. Now, I say that, but Bauer's suspension was the longest, and he had a bad reputation in terms of personality earlier. Now, that said, his talent is above any of these guys.
Yeah.
Even Chapman. And Chapman has gotten many jobs.
Yeah, he
had one job pulled out from him at that moment where it surfaced. But he did get the suspension, served the suspension, and he's gotten many jobs since then. And again, I'm not going to compare the situations. None of it's good. Bauer did have the longest suspension, so take that for what it's worth.
Yep, take that for what it's worth. All right, John, and real quick, the other free agents that we talked about, Bellinger, Snell, these guys, JD Martinez, where do we stand with some of these big names?
I'm not sure that we're close on any of it right now. And Scott Boras is the agent for the top four guys, and right now he's wrapped up in arbitration. I think he has 3 cases going starting today. So I'm not sure that this is going to get wrapped up in the next few days or before spring training starts. You would think that in spring training something will happen for all of these guys. They're obviously beyond Martinez, we already talked about. Montgomery was outstanding last year, helped the Rangers win the World Series. Snell, NL Cy Young winner. I mean, that one is shocking to me. Even though he has turned 31 years old, obviously he was the second best pitcher in baseball last year to Cole. Then, of course, you have Bellinger and you have Chapman still out there. I mean, if you're going to guess today, you'd think that Bellinger and the Cubs will eventually work it out, but can't guarantee it. My wild card team there is the Phillies. Boras has a great relationship with John Middleton, who's done great in free agency between Harper and Castellanos, Boras' clients. Schwarber, certainly Wheeler, who he wants to re-sign. So, to me, Bellinger does make sense for the Phillies, speculatively. The Angels have been thinking about it. They've been in contact. They would make sense for really basically any of these guys, except probably Chapman. I'm going to say Chapman. Obviously, Melvin wants him there with the Giants. Good shot there. If not, I'm going to say maybe the Cubs there as well. So maybe Chapman and Bellinger both go to the Cubs. I still think Texas and Montgomery make the most sense. They get that TV situation resolved, and it's supposed to happen today. Maybe Montgomery will go to Texas. I like Boston also. For Montgomery, I mean, Snell could be anywhere at this point, whether it be San Francisco, Angels. I mean, could the Yankees get back in it? I mean, they're saying no. They're saying they signed Stroman instead. But I mean, Stroman, frankly, was $37 million. You know that Snell is looking to get $200 million plus. It's really not in the same category. So I'm not going to rule it out. Although if the Yankees are reading these projections, they probably think they've got the wild card, or at least the division sewn up at this point. I mean, I don't know. I hope they have their own models. I don't know.
John, that's very funny. All right, let's bring this all home. Your questionable team of the week heading into spring training. What do you got?
I got to go with the Brewers. I mean, I've questioned them before, and they always come out smelling like a rose, and they win that division every year. But I mean, to trade Corbin Burns, who's going to make $15.5 million next year, and then sign two guys for $14 million, Jacob Junis and our old friend Gary Sanchez for $14 million. They saved $1 million. I don't think it's the $1 million. I know they're small market, but I mean, I don't think it's the $1.5 million that did this. They have some model that shows them that Corbin Burns was not that valuable to them. I don't know, I didn't go to MIT or Harvard or anything like that. I've got my Northwestern shirt on today, but was not a math major, so don't go by me. I've heard they have some model that says Corbin Burns is worth one win to them. I can't imagine how that is right. I mean, I don't believe the WAR entirely, but if you look at the WAR, he's certainly worth 4 or 5 wins. That's kind of been his category. He's been one of the best pitchers in baseball. They're out 180 innings. Junis has been mostly a reliever. So I'm not sure how they do it, but when they traded Hader, I thought that was ridiculous, and they've done some odd things. And you're a small market team, you've got to be nimble and you've got to do something different. And I get that. And they've been very, very successful. So who am I to question? But I don't get basically trading Corbin Burns for Gary Sanchez and Jacob Junis. Not my cup of tea, but their decision.
It is their decision, and it was questionable, like you said. John, we appreciate you as always for going around the bases with us and bringing us all your insight. Obviously, we are looking forward to seeing spring training start. Pitchers and catchers coming in a couple days, and it's gonna be fun, man. I'm getting ready to rock and roll for baseball season. I know you are too.
All right, always a pleasure, Ryan. We'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good. Thank you, man.